Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Charlie Mike training series. And we have today with us Adam from Parrot Surety Services, and we're here to listen to episode number 3. We're really going to do a deep dive into all things surety bonds, evaluating surety credit, and what underwriters look for. Adam, I'm really super interested in learning about what those financial people look for when an application comes in. So I'm going to turn the reins over to you. I'm going to go into stealth mode and I'm going to let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Marie. Hello, everybody. My name's Adam. I'm the owner and surety bond specialist at Parrot Surety Services, and today we're going to be talking about how surety underwriters evaluate a principal for surety credit. The agenda, we're going to talk about the surety underwriting fundamentals known as the 3 C's. We're going to talk about roadblocks that you may come across in contract or bond form language. We're going to talk about the 2 most important financial statement calculations on the balance sheet for estimating surety credit. We're going to calculate work on hand and how you track profitability on projects, how underwriters determine account rates, and how you can calculate your surety premium. So check out this live image of a surety underwriter's office. We're going to look and talk about what happens at this underwriter's desk. The surety underwriter's goal overall is to develop and maintain a profitable growing book of business. Surety underwriters are completely risk averse and aim for no claims, no losses. So these are the factors and fundamentals that they observe, known as the 3 C's. We have character, we have capital, and we have capacity. So character is number 1. It can be a disqualifier. The underwriter takes into account the credit score, legal history, looks for tax liens or judgments, and may even call on references. If there are any negative marks as to your character in this investigation, the underwriter might be skeptical of considering an approval for the account or the bond, even if you have strong financial statements. The second C is capital. Capital is all about those said financial statements and the most important. Your net worth and access to capital are the measuring stick for how large of projects you can pursue and how large your backlog can get. These are known as your single and aggregate limits. They're calculated from working capital and net worth, which are typically large or growing as the result of a well-run company who's profitable and has their cash flow figured out. Capacity is the third and final consideration of the principal during the underwriting analysis. When applying for a bond for a specific project, the underwriter will look to see similar size and scope of projects on the application. Remember from the last episode, those 3 large projects that are your 3 largest projects on the application, and they'll want to see that you have a similar management team or the same team equipped to handle, that same kind of work. If it's in your neighborhood, they're going to want to see it in the same or similar geography. If not, the surety will want to see some sort of reasoning for your expansion into a new market, and you'll have to work with your agent to come up with some sort of reasoning to write up and give to the underwriter. That's because local contractors, whenever you go into new areas or new geographies, labor and costs are typically different from where you're used to working, and the local contractors in that area will probably be difficult to compete with anyways, because they probably have connections with better rates in terms for materials, and will also be up to speed on local labor laws. However, prior to the underwriting of the company and the principal, they'll check that the surety company is actually open to underwriting this type of risk or this type of bond. The underwriter looks for preventative language within the contract, the bond form, underlying statute and regulation. Occasionally, subcontractors to large primes will have very one-sided contracts or master subcontracting agreements that essentially are big businesses taking advantage of small businesses. And this can make the arrangement difficult or impossible to bond. Some of those languages are, is the obligation cancelable? So most obligations are cancelable, some are not. If the surety can't get off the risk and manage particular risks, that makes it more risky for them. And many sureties will not write them, and other sureties that do write them will charge higher rates. Is there forfeiture or pay on demand language? So a big piece of what value the surety brings to you is if there's any kind of claim situation, they have a huge legal team that'll come in, do an investigation, and if you're doing the right thing, and as the contract says, they'll stand up for you, and so you have legal support in those kinds of situations, and that's why they don't like the forfeiture or pay on demand language because it doesn't give them a chance to investigate and prevent any kind of claim situation from going on. So another consideration is who are the parties to the agreement. If there's more than one obligee, multiple obligees, sometimes there's a bank that wants to be on it or other parties, that can complicate things and make it difficult to get your bond. Same with the third party liability. We talked about that in our episode 2. This is when there's an obligee, and the third party liability means anybody can make a claim on the bond. It makes it highly likely that there's going to be a bond claim, and that comes with inherent risk for the surety, and they're hesitant to write those, especially on a standalone basis. But if you have a large contract program with them and this is on a commercial bond, they're usually more than willing to write that for you. Is there uncapped liability? So all bonds have a bond limit. Usually that's also, the penal sum of the bond. If the language in the bond form allows that limit to go beyond that, usually the surety can't measure, what's their total risk out for that bond. So they're not going to want to write that bond or write on that bond form. Does the bond have a long tail? So some bonds, even after they're closed out, go on forever or for a period of time afterwards. So the surety's risk doesn't get closed out with the bond. So that's additional risk for the surety. They don't want to write this kind of stuff. It's higher risk. It'll come with higher premiums or additional terms. Is there an auto escalation clause? So an auto escalation clause means that if the bond amount is $1 million, there's language in the bond form that says that the obligee or project owner can increase that bond amount without approval from the surety. So as you can tell, if there's any kind of claim situation that's about to happen, I'm sure that obligee is going to make sure that, they escalate that amount to however much money they want or need. And that's a problem for the surety, not a situation that the surety wants to sign themselves up for. And then lastly, we have liquidated damages and consequential damages in the contract. You want to look for those, see how much they are. If there's liquidated damages, anything up to like $2,500 is pretty acceptable depending on the size and complexity of the project or obligation. And consequential damages, those are pretty much a non-starter. Get those out of a contract before you sign it. And if there are any of these hurdles in your contracts or bond forms, that doesn't mean you can't get your bond. However, the approval for the bond may carry higher rates and or have some strings attached. And then I would definitely recommend the possibility to go back to the project owner and negotiate either, wherever that problematic language is in the contract or in the bond form. Typically, these large companies are just paying a lawyer to really stand up for them, and they don't really mean to be being bossy in these situations. And they're usually pretty reasonable whenever there's some pretty, one-sided language in those contracts. So with that being said, we're going to move into the balance sheet calculations and look at the work on hand, two of the important documents that come with the application. So those two calculations that we're looking at today are working capital and equity. We can calculate these from a balance sheet. This is interim balance sheet. We can tell because it doesn't say year ended and it's June 30th, 2023. So typically underwriters actually underwrite from year end financial statements because it encompasses the whole snapshot of the whole year and can't really be manipulated as easily. So starting with working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. We see those right here. We see total current, or not total current assets. Yeah, total current assets of 2.2 million and total current liabilities of 870,000. That gives us an as given working capital of 1.3 million. However, underwriters, whenever they look through the balance sheet, they make their adjustments. And two things that I see here on this balance sheet are the accounts receivable and accumulated depreciation. So with accounts receivable, you can see that the accounts receivable, the money on the street here is 1.5 million. And so if I were looking at this balance sheet, I would want to see an aging of receivables to see what is over 90 days, because typically underwriters discount anything over 90 days because it's highly likely that the contractor or whoever owns this balance sheet is probably not going to be able to collect those. So they're questioning, what actually is an asset here that you're going to collect on. So sometimes they also discount receivables over 60 days. So that's something that, I would, as an agent, talk with the contractor about. And, if there's anything over 60 or 90, we would provide some discussion on that to make sure that those are good receivables if they are. And then we see accumulated depreciation here. This is called a non-cash asset. So accumulated depreciation, essentially for building equipment, and the vehicles listed here, not for land. Land does not depreciate, but for those other assets, essentially they depreciate over time down to zero. And so this is the line item that helps that happen. And so, big contractors, miners, with all their mining equipment, they typically have lots of equipment and lots of accumulated depreciation. And at the end of the day, if they were to sell all of that equipment, it's usually worth more than it's showing net on the balance sheet. So we'll make adjustments there and add a little bit of money back sometimes for that. And then second thing we're going to look at here is the equity, which is your total assets minus your total liabilities with any adjustments that the underwriters may make. Other adjustments that the underwriter might make are prepaid assets and payables due. So prepaid assets, they kind of like usually disallow them or discount them, and then payables due from shareholders are also typically discounted. And as you can see, equity actually comes across on the balance sheet, so you don't have to do any calculations there for the given. There might be an adjusted equity that the underwriter accounts for with all those adjustments from prepaid assets, payables due from shareholders, accounts receivable, accumulated depreciation, that kind of stuff. And why these are the most important ones is because this calculates what size projects you can go after and your total backlog of projects. So for your single project limit, you're going to take that calculation, that adjusted working capital calculation, times it by 10, and that's typically about what you can qualify for a single project size. Another consideration we need to make there is looking at those 3 largest projects that you have on your book. It's limited to about up to 2 times the size of your largest project. So if you here, they might qualify for over $10 million in bonding based on their working capital. However, if they haven't done a job over, at $5 million limit, there's no way that, well, I would almost say there's no way, but it'll be more difficult to get approval for a $10 million project. And then so your equity times 10, this contractor could qualify potentially for up to $50 million in bonding, or potentially more on their backlog. So here is a work on hand schedule. This is where a contractor can track all of their open bonded and unbonded projects, aka the backlog, which tracks the outstanding cost to complete on all the contracts, and it gets compared against the aggregate limit on your bond program. Underwriters utilize this work on hand to determine the profitability, accuracy of estimators, proficiency of project managers, look for potential job delays or job cost borrowing. Job cost borrowing is when money is being taken from one project to fund another. We'll actually talk about that on the next slide. But there are 5 components that are necessary to track and important to track. Number 1, the contract price to include approved change orders. Then we also, the contractor's estimated cost when bid, and that also includes any costs of approved change orders. The total amount billed to date, including retainage, the total cost to date, and the revised estimated cost to complete. With these so this is a short form WIP. There's a long form one that we'll look at next, but we'll take these inputs and automatically calculate some income analysis by the job on the long form WIP. And that's this. So this is the long form WIP, and really the two things that the underwriters are looking for here are these two things, the last two columns, cost and earnings in excess of billings, which is called underbillings, and billings in excess of costs and earnings, which is overbillings. These are important because it's not necessarily that one's better than the other or worse than the other, but each project is going to fall into one of the two categories. It'll never be exactly billed. So the underwriters understand that, contractors understand that. So with that being said, what they're looking for here is to make sure that this isn't becoming the overbillings aren't getting too large and, on every project. This is usually a sign that there's cash flow problems, and that's what the underwriters are looking for here on the WIP. And this is also a great tool for the contractors to have to know, how they stand financially, to make sure they're cash flowing their projects, to make sure they're billing their projects and collecting money on their projects. If you want a copy of this WIP, feel free to send me an email, adam@parrotsuretyservices.com. It's a great tool for you to have, and it definitely helps to keep this together for your surety agent. So at the end of all of that, the underwriter is going to determine your account rate and hopefully give you an approval. All the variables that we just went over are considered, kind of put into those two categories, looking at the bond and the bond form and the contract and the risks tied to that, and then also looking at the contractor or the principal's qualification. The character, why that's highlighted. Sometimes most bonds under like $750,000 can pretty much be a credit check. Don't really require, all of that financials and stuff like that. Even for a bond program, there's companies that do, a 750 over 750 line without financials as long as you have good credit. Once you're looking to expand beyond that, then we'll need to go through with like a full surety submission. But looking at the bond and bond form, there's all kinds of the SFAA, the Surety and Fidelity Association of America, tracks like bonds by type and what the industry loss ratio is for those types of bonds. So we're looking at the potential for default and claim based on history, and if historically those types of bonds have higher loss ratios, they usually cost more. Most sureties don't want to write them. And so inherently it's more difficult to get done. And then the second point of the bond is how severe would the claim be? If there's a large project with a lot of different parts, split up between, different contractors and stuff like that, then, one claim might not be as severe. If we're talking about a roofing contractor, a glazing contractor, if they mess up on the warranty on the roof, that whole roof needs to come off and get redone. If a glazing contractor messes something up whenever they're cutting the windows, all that glass needs to be cut. So those are like large, complete losses. And so, as an example, the roofing contractors and the glazing contractors aren't widely accepted by all sureties and are inherently, more difficult to get placed and have usually higher rates. With that all being said, rates are varied by surety company, but they are regulated by the state insurance commissioner. The reason being is this ensures equality and fairness in pricing between contractors, no matter their race, color, religion, all of that stuff. So calculating surety premium. So the easy way to calculate surety premium, there's two different ways that you can get. You might have a flat rate, which means that your rate is 2, 3, 2.5%, whatever it may be, pretty easy. You just take that rate, multiply it by the bond premium, and you get or multiply it by the bond amount, and then you get your bond premium. So a 2.5% rate on a $1 million bond, 2 million times 2.5% times 1 million, $25,000 premium. As you grow and get larger, you'll likely get into sliding scale or deviated rates. And this just means the rate decreases as the project gets larger. So think about it this way. If you have $100 million project, it's highly likely the further along that project gets, the less risk there is against that $100 million. So it's highly, unlike with the roofing and glazing contractors, you're not going to be starting with from the beginning. There's going to be some value on the project site already. So there's less risk as the project increases in size. It's more likely that, we're going to be using deviated rates as you grow. So here's an example for a $7.5 million project. This would be a 2% sliding scale. So the first $1 million of the project, the premium would be calculated 2% times 7.5 million. The next $2 million from 1 to 3 million would be 1.2% times the 7.5 million, and 0.9% for the 3 million to 5.5 million, and 0.75 on the last 2.5 million for a total premium of 72,250. If the contract does run longer than 12 months, there is additional bond charges at the rate of 1% a month. So 1% of that bond premium, $722.50. That would be the cost per month for any projects running over 12 months. Additionally, the final bond premium is adjusted at the end of the project for any underrun or overrun. So this $7.5 million project, if it's 8 million, that additional $500,000 would be charged by the surety. And if the project ends up being only $7 million, that portion of the premium would be returned at the end of the project. So yeah, that concludes our presentation for today. We got one more final episode talking about how you can maximize your surety capacity. Marie, back to you.
Okay. Wow. That was a lot of numbers, Adam.
Oh yeah.
Lots of
Yep,
calculations.
surety
Great
is all
info.
about the numbers, all about the financials.
Cool. I can't wait to listen to the final episode. So everybody will have to stay tuned for that. Again, all of these series are going to be, or all of these episodes are going to be put on the Charlie Mike website. So please keep a lookout for that. And with that, Adam, I'm going to kind of close us out now, and we'll be back for that final episode, which I'm assuming is going to be even more numbers and even greater detail on all things surety bonds.